all, and welcome to the third webinar, to the third episode of the ETN Global webinar series on the profitability of thermal assets. Today, we will have two presentations on the capacity remuneration mechanisms with Elia, so the Belgian transmission organization. So we'll have with us Louis Magein, who will provide us with a detailed or exclusive overview of what is the adequacy report of Elia for the period 2026 to 2036, after which we'll have a short question and answers session to be followed later on by a second presentation by Julie Van Steen on the functioning of the CRM. So again, this is the third episode of the webinar series, which will continue until February 2026. So with no further delays, I would like to give the floor to Luis for the first presentation. And Luis, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Nicolo, and good afternoon to everyone. So, indeed, the presentation of today will be about capacity remuneration mechanism, and in particular the case of Belgium, for which Elia is actively working on. But yeah, my presentation on my side. So Julie will go into more details about really the CRM in Belgium and how it works. On my side, I will take maybe a more general overview, looking at three main elements. So the first one, it's why is a CRM needed in Belgium? And so for this, we have our Adequacy and Flexibility Studies that we published in June 25 that provide some insights on this question, and I will go through the main messages from this study. Then, based on this study, I will also provide some additional information about the evolution of the energy market and what is expected in terms of running hours for the thermal assets in Belgium, and then more specific information about the CRM in Belgium. So, to answer the first question, as I said, I will introduce the Adequacy and Flexibility Study that we do in Belgium. So this study is actually the fifth that we do. So the first one was done in 2016 on the demand from the energy minister in Belgium, and the goal was mainly to look at the nuclear phase out in Belgium and how we should deal with the phase out of the nuclear capacity in Belgium, and then this study becomes a legal requirement, so it's in the Belgian law, and it's actually our national adequacy from resource adequacy assessment, so the NRAA, which follow the ERA methodology, so the methodology that is set at European level. So how is this study in general? In general, how does it look like? So the starting point is the scenarios that we use. So we try to look at different scenarios, different storylines for the future. I will come back on this. And with those scenarios, we will use an economic dispatch model to provide first some results about adequacy. So is the system in Belgium compliant with our reliability standard? Yes. So is it? Do we have issue with the security of supply in Belgium? And based on this, we will also do an economic viability assessment. There, the goal is to really look at the variability of the units. So both existing one, but also the potential new one that would be needed according to the first part. And then we have a whole flexibility assessment, which look at the forecast errors from the demand side, but also on the supply for the rest, the outages of thermal plants. But this is a part that I won't discuss today. But so you have the global pictures of this study. So in this study, we are looking 10 years ahead. That's really the time horizon for adequacy studies. And we will look at all countries in Europe. It's especially important for Belgium because we are small countries with a lot of interconnection with our neighboring countries. So correctly modeling both Belgium but also the neighboring countries is really key to ensure that the system is well calculated and that we really show the need for Belgium depending on the assumptions of other countries. So we do simulation from 2026 until 2036 to have really the full overview for the adequacy results, but also for economics. So in the past, we did one specific scenario, a scenario that was aligned with the ERA methodology. So with also the ambition set at European level. So in line with the national energy and climate plans for Belgium, but also for the neighboring countries. It was also aligned with the latest announcements from politics and the policies and so on. So now it's part of one specific scenarios, which is the current commitment and ambition scenario. But we also look at alternative scenarios. So we have the constraint transition, which assume some delays in terms of electrification, in terms of grid developments, but also in terms of RES developments. And we have another one, which is a bit the opposite, which assume more electrification, mainly from end user. So assuming that the cost of solar panels, of batteries will be cheaper, and so that we will have a faster uptake, mainly driven by end users. So more electric vehicles, also more heat pumps. So with these three scenarios that we consider as equal in terms of probability, let's say, we try to give some guidelines to the energy minister to set the energy policy for Belgium. So as I said, the first step for this study is really to fix the scenario. So I will quickly go through the main elements of the scenarios at European level. So first, on the demand side, all scenarios assume some electrification. So we can see that from 1990 we have a steady increase of the electricity consumption with some downward peaks with the crisis, the war in Ukraine, the COVID that we saw. But from now we assume some electrification storylines, and so as I introduced, the storylines will be different in the three storylines. So the constraint transition will be the one with the lowest electrification, and the prosumer power one will be the one with the highest increase. So we do the same for the other parameters. So it's also the same for the RES ambitions. So if we start from the commitments and the current ambitions in neighboring countries, we obtain the blue curves. So for solar, we assume that this blue curve is achievable in both the current commitment, but also in a constraint transition scenario. But in a prosumer power scenario, so with again cheaper solar production, we could go to a faster uptake of this solar energy. For the wind, that's the opposite. So we assume that the pace assumed in the current commitment is already quite ambitious. So it's the same also for the prosumer power scenarios, but we assume scenario in the constraint transitions with some delays or some more effect of the NIMBY effect, for example, for onshore. So meaning that we have a trajectory that is significantly lower. And then in general for the thermal layer, what we see is having nuclear capacity in Europe that, at least for the next decade, is expected to remain quite stable, with some decommissioning, but also commissioning of new units like in Flamanville, Hinkley Point C in the UK. And on the other side, regarding the coal phase out in Europe in general, but with Germany and Poland having assumptions having significant impact on the European mix. So that's really for the main messages regarding the scenarios. It's much more detailed in the report that is available on Elia website, and especially for Belgium, where we have a really detailed results for everything. And yeah, that provides more insights also. So from this, the question is, okay, is there a need for new capacity in Belgium to meet the reliability standard? So in Belgium, the reliability standard is fixed to 3 hours of LOLE, so loss of load expectation. And so how do we calculate this, and how do we assume that there is a need for capacity? So this is done with some simulations, some Monte Carlo simulation that we performed. So we take input data for all countries on a hourly time step. So yeah, we gather information on the consumptions, the storage, the generation, the demand side response, but also on the grid infrastructure for all European countries, and we will perform a early dispatch optimization, taking into account all those information. And with this, we can, as output, obtain the energy mix for all countries, the commercial exchanges, the prices, and we can also look at adequacy indicators. So are there some hours with loss of load expectation? And that's really the first insight to calculate our first indicators, which is the adequacy. So if I simplify it quite a lot, we will look at the electricity consumption that we have in Belgium. On top of this, we will add some reserve that we assume for balancing, and we will deduct all the generation, the storage, the DSR capacity that we have in Belgium, and the remaining capacity so the capacity that is missing is what we call the gap. So it's really the additional capacity which is assumed to be available all the time. In order to do this, we take a strong assumptions for this first part. It's that all the thermal capacity and all existing capacity will remain in the market. So once we have this, so we will perform a first simulation, and we will really look, okay, we have our security of supply criteria for Belgium, so this 3 hours of LOLE, and in the simulation, in the scenario that we have, are we below or above this criteria? So if we have a LOLE criteria which is lower than the reliability standard, it means that we have which is higher, sorry. So if we have a LOLE which is higher than the 3 hours, it means that we need some additional volume in the system to make it adequate. And so we will add a block of 100 megawatt of capacity until we reach the adequacy criteria. And on the other way around, we'll do exactly the same. So to look if we have potential margin in the system. So it means that from this first simulation, if we have a LOLE which is lower than the 3 hours, it means that we could have an additional margin in the system, and we will translate these values from hours into megawatt of capacity. So that's for the methodology in general, and what does it give in terms of results. So this one is one of the key figures that we have from this adequacy studies. I will take some time to explain it because I know that there is quite a lot of information on this graph. So the goal of this graph was really to start in Belgium from a situation in 2025 where there were no CRM and no nuclear extension. So since this moment, the first thing that we see is that the Belgian government decided in 2022 to extend 2 nuclear units, so Doel4 and Tihange in Belgium. So it means that we had additional capacity available in the system. And then on top of this, a CRM was also put in place in Belgium with the first auction that was held in 2021. And thanks to this system, some capacity was already contracted in past auction. So there were 2 new CCGTs, the extension of 1 old CCGTs, and a lot of additional batteries. So that's really the blue part that we have here, with the derated volume that is assumed. So it's an equivalent volume, 100% available. So this is the new capacity that we have from 2025, and then we will look at taking into account this additional volume, is there a margin or a need for new capacity in Belgium? And that is represented by the 3 different bars that we have here. So for each of the scenario that we have in the study, so the constraint transition, the current commitments, and the prosumer power one. So we see that in the short term for all scenarios, so the system is adequate. There are some margin in Belgium, so there is an excess of supply, and then the situation tends to invert from 2028, 2030. But we also see that with the current pace of the capacity added in the system via the CRM, it could be also manageable. But so we have with the electrification in the different scenarios, we have different paths of need for new capacity. So it's of course short. So the need is shorter in the constraint transition scenarios and is the highest in the prosumer power scenarios. So depending of the choices of the minister, we have different storylines, but those storylines also include already some flexibility, and the assumptions regarding the flexibility are also quite ambitious, and so we also add an extra messages, which is the value in green, to explain that this flexibility that we assume in the system need to be unlocked, and if it's not the case, then the need for new capacity would increase by the value that you have here in the box. So that was really a first messages from the study to say we have an increasing need for capacity, so it will continue. So there is there is a need to be able to contract or to have additional capacity in the system. And the second one that we see on this graph is that from 35 with the nuclear phase out, this need would of course increase even more because you have to replace this nuclear block by additional capacity. But what we tried also to show from this figure is that what we have in place in Belgium is working fine. So if the need every year is covered by the CRM, so that's filling the light blue part that we have here. We see that the additional volume each year that we would need to add to the system is quite limited and could be fulfilled by the CRM. So the CRM that we have in place should be able to contract 200 to 400 megawatt of additional capacity in the system. And via the CRM, we can contract some existing thermal storage and flexibility. But in the longer term, we also said via the study that there might be a need for additional capacity for other options, which could be the additional nuclear extension in Belgium, but also some additional offshore, additional interconnection, of sufficiency measures at Belgian level. So with this figure, we try to show that there is a need for new capacity. But then the question also in the CRM framework is, now there are two questions actually. The first one is, okay, we have a need for additional capacity, but can the energy only market support on its own this additional capacity, yes or no? And are there any risks that existing units would be leaving the market without additional support like the CRM? So that's really the second part of this storyline. So as I said, in the first part, we took a strong assumption saying that all the existing capacity will remain in the market. So here we will try to see, okay, if this capacity can remain and will be viable in the market without additional support. But on the other way around, we look, okay, if there is new capacity that could come in an energy-only market framework. And so that's what we do with this economic viability assessments, which is also a requirement from the European regulation. So in short, what's economic viability assessment? So that's really the economical analysis to determine whether existing and new capacity can remain or become economically viable under current and projected market conditions. Why do we do this economic viability assessments? It's really to check if the energy-only market can support the new capacity and also the existing one. And if it's not the case, it would mean that an additional support mechanism would be needed, like the CRM. And so from this economic viability assessment, what we showed is that first, so all the new no new capacity was able to be viable in the system. So that's already a first message. So it means that the additional capacity that we saw in the first part could not come on its own. And on top of this, so that's really the results on this graph, is that we would need an additional volume to be contracted because a significant part of the existing units won't be economically viable. So in most of the scenario, we have between 1.5 and 1.6 gigawatt of thermal capacity that would be not viable. So that would need to be replaced by other capacities. And we also see that if the energy minister would decide to extend additional nuclear, this need would further increase, because it would lead to lower prices and hence meaning less revenues also for existing units. So that's really the second message that we had on this study. So with this, we were able to show to the energy minister that we have a significant non-viable gap. So the gap that is that we cannot cover with only the energy-only market. That we have limited signals for new investments. So it means that this CRM would be needed. And finally, we also show that the existing units in the current but also in the future framework would be a risk. And with this, we can also show that this CRM should be maintained in Belgium for the mid to long term. So this concludes the first part of the presentation. Then I would go also to some other elements of the study that can also be of interest, and also to make the link with the role of the thermal capacity in the market for the future. So with the different scenarios that we have, basically we see a significant increase of the rest share in the system. So it's around 47% now, but it's expected to grow quite significantly in the future. So reaching 66% in 2030 and 73% in 36. Again, in the current commitment. So taking into account the policies, the climate plans, and so on. And this will also it can be also reflected on the prices. So we look at the yearly prices in the different scenarios, and in general the average prices remains relatively constant, I would say. So it decreased a bit with the integration of the renewables capacity in general, and we have for the specific case of Belgium some peaks when we have more nuclear capacity available, or the commissioning of big offshore park in Belgium, or new interconnection. But that's really only a part of the story, because if we look at the price duration curve that we have for Belgium, there we see that the story is really different. So in the future, we expect much more moments with low prices, which is linked to moments where we have some oversupply generation in the system. So it's zero or near to zero prices. Then we have also much more moments here where we have some moments where we have other type of capacity which are fixing the prices. So it's still not thermal units that are running, but more the hydro, the storage, the demand side, which is fixing the prices. And then with the moment where the thermal assets start to run are much more limited than in 37 than in 27. And finally, the moments with high prices would tend to be more important, but really for a limited amount of hours. And so these trends, we can show it also differently. So we see, as I said, that the amount of hours per year with prices under €5 will increase in all scenarios. Here we see the ranges across the different weather conditions that we assume. But so in any case, it's expected to increase quite significantly. But we can also show it with another relevant graph, which is the marginal units, which is fixing the prices. So how do we make this graph? Is just looking at for each hour of the year which technology is fixing the prices in the system. So we see that in 2026 we have a small part of the periods where it's renewables, nuclear. The other technologies, mainly hydro, flexibility storage, and the part of gas fixing the prices is still quite important. So it's more than 50%. And in the future, this trend will change quite significantly. So the rest marginality will shift from 7% in 26 to 20% at the end of the time horizon. But the gas marginality will decrease from 50% to 23%. So it means that other technologies are found to increasingly influence the prices. But on the other way around, the running hours for the thermal units, so that are still really needed in the system for adequacy purpose, but the running hours would decrease. So it's a bit a main message that we have. So we would need this capacity. So we would need the megawatts, but the the running hours of those units are expected to decrease. And yeah, indeed, if we look at specific technologies, so here on the graphs we showed 3 different ones. So efficient CCGT, existing CCGT that is representative for what we have in the system, and an old one. We see that the running hours are really expected to decrease for the most efficient CCGT. So it's really linked to the fact that the rest, the nuclear and other technologies fixing the price will be more present in the system. But for the other one, it's expected to slightly decrease, but to remain more or less the same, because for really the peak moments, those units will still be needed. So that's for the second part of the presentation. And now, so I tried to explain why we need a CRM in Belgium, some small indicators about the evolution of running hours of thermal assets, but also on the energy mix. But now I will give some maybe the link with what we do in the CRM auction for Belgium, and then Julie will also complement on this. So for the CRM in Belgium, we have 3 auctions. So for every target year, we have a year -1, year -2, and year -4 auction, which include some elasticity in the demand curve. And all demand curve are calibrated in order that the point B is calibrated to the 3 hours Lollet criteria that we have for Belgium. So the volume is calibrated in order to reach the security of supply for Belgium. So how do we fix this point B? It means that the minister had to make the energy minister has to make a choice on the scenario that he wants for the security of supply of Belgium. So it means that every year the minister selects one reference scenario, so based on the insights from the Adequacy study, about the electricity consumptions, the generation, the storage, the demand side response, the capacities in neighboring countries, but also some economic parameters, so the fuel and CO2 prices, the capex, and so on. So that's really the input data for the study, and based on this, Elia will calculate the different elements that are needed to set the demand curve. So as I said, one important parameter is the minister published is the economic parameters. And for information on this slide, I provide the latest data that was selected. So it's part of a consultation process led by the CREG, so the Belgian regulator. So every year they do a public consultation and they provide some capex from lifetime construction period for the different technologies to fix the price parameters of the demand curve. And in the latest for the latest decision, it was decided to fix the capex for CCGT to a bit less than 900 euro per kilowatt, and a bit less than 700 megawatt for an OCGT. So that's also something on which we have a lot of times some feedback that the values are too low. So on this one, really any feedback, ideally including public sources, are more than welcome. So yeah, if you have available sources that could be used to challenge the values published by the CREG, it's really more than welcome. So those values, as I say, will be used to calculate with the price parameters of the demand curve, which is, and the main one is the net Kone. So the net Kone, it's really looking at the among all the technologies selected by the CREG, the one with the lowest missing money. And so in order to do this, so the CREG will fix the capex, the firm values for the different technologies, and Elia will provide an estimation of the ancillary services revenues and the energy market revenues. So with all those information, the CREG will, so the Belgian regulator will be able to calculate the missing money of all technologies, and the missing money of the technology with the lowest missing money will be the one setting the net Kone, so setting the price parameters for the auction. So it will be the price cap for new capacity in the system. Yes, and also for information here, I put some values for the different categories of thermal units that were published in the latest CRM calibration report. So the one from 2024, knowing that the next one will be published by the 1st of December of this year, so next week actually. And so, yeah, the idea is to show for different categories of CCGTs and OCGTs the expected revenues that we see in the market. So for the rest of the information regarding the CRM, I will let Julie do a more detailed presentation. But yeah, so now if you have any presentation on the white topic that I presented, yeah, feel free to ask.
Thank you, Luis, for your presentation, very detailed presentation. So I would like to open the floor for any questions or comments you have. So if you have any questions, your mics are now disabled. Please raise your hand and I will enable your mic and you can ask your question. Okay, so we have a question by Alexander. What learnings did you take from the UK CRM auction started in 2013, I believe?
Yeah, indeed. So we had some exchanges with with UK on the CRM design, but on this maybe Julie you can also answer. But yeah, also in terms of parameters and need for capacity, we had indeed some exchanges, and it's also interesting to see that the trends that we see for Belgium are also observed in UK. So for example, the trend having a need for capacity in megawatt, but running for a limited amount of running hours. So that's also something that is shown in the UK CRM. And yeah, we try also to have some exchanges to work on the common topic that we have in both CRM. It's mainly for for example, about the integration of batteries that also a big part in the UK CRM for now. And I mean correctly calculating the contribution of batteries to the system. I don't know, Julie, if you want to complement maybe on the interaction with UK.
Yes, indeed. Also, from the design perspective, we also did some benchmarking and alignment with the colleagues from the UK. And I think as they implemented the mechanism before it was done in Belgium, quite of the main design principles are actually aligned with the UK. So many of the topics that I will explain later on in the presentation are similar to the UK one. For example, a similar, really a specific feature that I can mention that was also used as a benchmark towards the European Commission at that time was, for example, to reserve part of the volumes that need to be auctioned and to need to be procured for the AIM-1 auction. So really to enable also demand response, etc. So there were quite some alignments made. So we did use indeed the experience from the UK, but also from other countries like Ireland, Poland, were all countries with a CRM before Belgium. And we did a benchmark, but every country also has its own specificities. So we tried then to tailor-made our design to make it with the best fit for the Belgian energy market.
You both for detailed response. We still have pair of questions before we move to the next presentation. So the first one is a question, well, two questions by Gunnar. So what are your considerations in relation to the 3 hours LOLE as criterion for adequacy? And how does this relate to market price peaks?
Yeah, so for the LOLE criteria, no, it's for the methodology for the LOLE calculation is set in the European regulation. So it's really the relationship between the value of lost load, so really the prices that the society would pay if there is a lack of capacity, and the cost of a new entry. So it's really the balance between both concepts. And really the impact on our simulation and on the running hours. I would say that the LOLE criteria, it's really an average on a wide set of different outcomes. So taking into account different outages patterns, for example, for the French nuclear or for the thermal assets in Belgium and Europe. And it's also taking into account different meteorological conditions. And so we do the LOLE criteria, so the 3 hours, it's an average across all those different patterns. But so it means that the LOLE that we obtain in our simulation, it can vary quite a lot. So most of the time we have 70% of the moment where there are no issue in the system, so the LOLE is equal to 0. We have 25% of moments with some LOLE, and then if we have bad meteorological conditions combined with also low thermal availability, we can have some years with really peak moments of LOLE. And so it means that if we look at the LOLE on average for the system, there can be some huge variation. But then it also means in terms of prices that you can have some years with a lot of scarcity prices and some moments with no moments of scarcity, so really no or limited price peaks. And on this, now the Belgian regulation said that we have to consider an average on this. So that's really a topic that we have also with the authorities and the regulator, because we consider an average revenues, but in fact the average is based on some years with also peak revenues that can influence quite a lot the results. So it's also which indicator is the best suited to a system with, depending of the condition, you can have a huge variation in the results. And so that's a question that we are also dealing with the authorities in Belgium, and that is key to do, for example, economic viability assessment.
Thank you, Luis. I see there are many questions. Unfortunately, we can just pick one before going to the next presentation. So, Alexander and Miguel, please feel free to reach out to us if you want to get in touch separately with Luis and Julie after our meeting. We would appreciate your understanding on this deviation from the program. We can still have a few minutes to address the other question that came actually now. So for thermal generation, which start-stop costs do you take into account in the revenue modeling?
Yeah, so for this, so we take into account the startup cost that from the general information that are available at European level. That's the data that you can find on the website of NSOE. And if available for Belgium, we take into account more unit by unit data. And for the revenues that were shown and the running hours and so on. But no, sorry, for the revenues, it's already taken into account the startup costs. So it's really the net revenues after the startup costs are deduced.
Thank you, Luis. So, all right. So we clarified some of the questions that came from our audience. So again, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach us out, write an email, and then we can also put you in touch with Luis and Julie. So thank you again, Luis, for your presentation and for your time to present at today's meeting. So now we are happy to give the floor to Julie, who will give us insights on the functioning of the CRM. So thank you, Julie. Floor is yours.
Yes, perfect. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. And thanks, Louis, for setting the perfect scene for my explanation on the introduction of the functioning of the Belgian CRM. So maybe before I kick off in more the content, just as a warning, the CRM is considered or can be quite complex. There's a lot to tell, and I have a limited time left to give you the main insights in this mechanism. But I think that the Belgian CRM is highly appreciated among market parties and also other TSOs of the level of transparency that we have on our website. So if you would have a need or if you wish to have more details on the exact specificities of what I've been telling here and on different characteristics of the CRM, there's quite some information available on our website. So I've added the link here in the presentation. We have a product sheet which gives a very short summary, and then we have some design notes which give also some insights in why some of the design choices have been made for the Belgian CRM. But of course, you can also contact Louis or me in case of further questions. Also, Elia really highly appreciates the interaction and feedback from market parties in designing this CRM. So we have also a working group, Adequacy, that we organize every 4 to 6 weeks. And it's open for participation of everyone who is an interest in following the main evolutions on adequacy at the Belgian levels. And before we introduce real changes, we also formally launch public consultations where input can be given. I think also Louis hinted already upon it, like if you have any insights in some of the values that we propose or that are proposed or approved by the regulator on cost parameters, revenue parameters, on which you have a strong opinion, don't hesitate to share them in the public consultation. It can only help on building a more sound and adequate mechanism. Then I plan to give some context, but I will be short here as Louis gave the perfect introduction for this. So what's the main goal of the Belgian CRM? It is ensure adequacy. So meaning that we want to have the Belgian system to be able to meet the demand for electricity at all times. And for that, the goal of the CRM, as you can see here on the timeline, it's a forward-looking, a long-term product. So there are 3 types of auctions that we organize: 4, 2, or 1 year in advance of the start of the delivery period. So the CRM really looks forward to check what is the expected capacity that we think that we will need to ensure the security of supply, to make sure that we can balance the system in real time, that there's sufficient capacity available. And we will then organize years upfront these auctions to make sure that the necessary investments in the new capacities or existing capacities can be made. So it's very clear, it's a forward-looking product. I think here I can be short because Louis explained it already, but we see indeed through our Adequacy and Flexibility Study that the energy-only markets, in terms of the long-term trading revenues, day-ahead revenues, intraday revenues, ancillary services, that in many cases they do not provide sufficient or stable revenues to make sure that the new investments that are needed to secure this security of supply, that they are not triggered. And the CRM aims to fill this gap that you see on the right side of the slide, to fill this gap in revenues to cover all the capacity relevant costs. By then concluding a capacity contract, the investors are sure to receive a certain fixed income for 1 year or multiple years to make sure they can then invest in the assets that the Belgian system needs. This slide has been covered in detail by Louis. So I think the main messages here for the CRM is that the ADECFlex indeed has shown that both new capacities and existing capacities are at risk. Both types of capacities can participate to the CRM. So the CRM is market-wide. It aims to provide investment signals both to the existing and new ones. If we then check here, also still as main of an introduction, like what are the main goals of the capacity remuneration mechanism that's being adopted? It's actually a combination of 3 targets, but the primary goal remains security of supply, as I said. So we want to have forward auctions years in advance to make sure that there is sufficient time for new investments and to make sure that on the long term the security of supply is ensured. But at the same time, this energy trilemma has other objectives that we want to take on board, mainly decided at the political level in Belgium, because of course through this capacity remuneration mechanism you can have impact on the capacity mix. You can steer a bit which new capacities are being developed. There, the key principle, and it's also a requirement from the European Commission to obtain state aid approval, is that the mechanism needs to be market-based. It needs to be market-wide, meaning, as I said, existing new capacities, but also technology neutral. So in theory, all types of capacities can participate, demand response, storage, and all types of production. Yet, and that's a political decision and also steered at the European Commission level, you can obviously also set CO2 thresholds. The details come back later for the Belgian mechanism, but there are some requirements, some eligibility criteria that need to be respected in order to be allowed to participate in the Belgian CRM. And via these CO2 thresholds, of course, the decarbonization objective enters into the Belgian CRM. But maybe also it's a good moment here to answer one of the questions I think of Miguel. Will additional capacity exclude gas-fired power plants? At this stage, the CO2 thresholds are not set in such a restrictive way that gas-fired power plants are excluded, so they are still possible to secure capacity contracts. But at this...
Let's use this one.
Yeah.
Taking all your stuff.
Hello, Miguel. Trying to answer your question.
Sorry.
no, go ahead. Oh, no, okay, I thought you wanted to add something. No, but indeed, so they're at this stage, they are allowed to participate. So the CO2 requirements are not set in such a restrictive way. But as we speak, the FPS economy, so the Belgian government is also launching a public consultation on seeing how the future trajectory of the CO2 thresholds can evolve. I think here, if you ask Elia's perspective, of course, this decarbonization is important, but we also want to avoid that the limitations become so restrictive that this first objective of security of supply, meaning of the CRM, meaning security of supply, cannot be met anymore. So at this stage, we do have gas-fired plants contracted via the Belgian CRM, and if they do, we have specific set of rules that need to be followed, meaning that there is some kind of undertaking that these power plants should try to become more CO2 neutral in the future. They have additional reporting requirements, etc., but all in function of the technological possibilities at that moment. So that's actually where we are now at the Belgian level with regard to the CO2 eligibility criteria. So there are two important objectives that the CRM tries to cover. Then additionally, also the euros, the costs are, of course, very important, especially for the end consumer in the Belgian system. And there, one of the main goals also from the CRM is to provide more stability to the investors, which can lead them to lower financing costs, a lower required WACC, as the risk, it's a different, I think Louis also explained it already, when your business case depends on a few very high price spikes, you introduce very high risk for investors, also for banks. The CRM tries to provide for a more stable revenue stream, at least for part of the investment, which can then lower the WACC and the finance costs. So these are the three main objectives that try to be covered by the CRM altogether, with main goal, of course, security of supply. It's the main reason for the existence of this tool. This is really the Belgian CRM in a nutshell, because what is it actually? It's a capacity mechanism, but you can have different forms of mechanisms. You can also have strategic reserves, you can have price-based mechanisms. But we see that there's more and more an evolution at the European level in different European countries to go to this type of design, like the Belgian CRM, but also like the one in the UK and Ireland, meaning that it's a volume-based mechanism. I think Louis also explained it already. The Belgian government, based on input from the TSO and the regulator, decides every year which volume we really want to have in the Belgian system, which capacity we need to ensure we respect this reliability standard of 3 hours. So it's not price-based, it's volume-based, and the auction will be organized in such a way that we're sure to secure the number of megawatts that we need for security of supply. You can have, for example, France for a long time, they also had a volume-based mechanism, but in a decentralized way. So market parties traded among each other and needed to respect their own capacity. In Belgium, it's a centralized procurement. And we see here again that a lot of countries are taking over the same model now. So it's one party, in this case, the Belgian government assigned Elia to take care of the organization of the auctions and to take care of signing the contracts with all the capacity providers that are selected in the auctions. So every year, again, Elia, based on the instructions we get from the minister on the auction parameters, organizes an auction process. And we are now in the situation that we manage, and it's quite complex from an operational point of view, that we manage 3 auctions in parallel. So every year since 2024, we organize 3 auctions, one for 4 years ahead, one 2 years ahead, and one for 1 year ahead. And this is to foresee again that we have a technology neutral mechanism to make sure that technologies with different lead times to be invested and to be constructed can participate in the CRM. For example, in the first IMIN4 auctions, we contracted 2 CCGTs, which needed then these 4 years of lead time to be constructed and to be ready by November 2025. I already said it, but it's really important to highlight. It's a market-wide mechanism, so all type of technologies can participate if they respect the eligibility criteria. And it's market-wise in the way that both new and existing capacities can participate. So we know that it's sometimes a misunderstanding that the idea lives that only new capacities can participate to fill the gap. But we also contract a lot of existing capacities that have missing money for their new investments that need support to maintain profitable in the markets. And I think then the next here, and I have a separate slide for that, but it might answer the last question or the question from Alexander. How to unlock this new capacities. I think here indeed Belgium learned from experience from past CRMs, and we allow contracts up to 15 years. It's not for everyone, it's not a default setting. So the default setting is that you can, as a capacity provider, have a contract for 1 year. But if you can demonstrate to the regulator, so in that case, you also enter a process with the regulator who needs to approve. If you can demonstrate that you have a very CapEx intensive investment to make, such as, for example, for the CCGTs that are contracted, you can get clearance for a contract of up to 15 years. And in this way, you can spread your missing money, the support that you need over 15 years, and become much more competitive in the auction, of course, because if you need to cover all the missing money during the economic lifetime of your assets in 1 year, of course, you would never be able to compete with existing capacities or refurbished capacities. But in this case, the capex can be spread over 15 years, implying that also these new capacities can be much more competitive with other technologies with existing capacities. And it's via this feature that we managed to unlock quite some new capacities in the Belgian CRM. But here a key role is for the regulator who needs to approve, and it's quite an intensive process where you need to give detailed insight in the capex, in the costs that you need to invest to come to the Belgian market. And I already said it. The first auction, we are live, we are operational for quite a while now. The first auction was organized in 2021, and this one was a 4-year, an auction 4 years ahead of the first delivery period in 2025. So since the beginning of this month, since November 2025, we are actually entering in really the delivery phase, as we call it. We are now really starting to pay out the capacity remunerations and also starting to monitor since last week the actual availability of the capacities that were contracted since 2021 to become available in the Belgian market in 2025. So beginning of November 2025 was a very, very important milestone for the Belgian CRM. So once you're selected, what are then the obligations that you hold? And I have a more detailed slide on that as well. We have 3 types of obligations that we will monitor. There's like the pre-delivery monitoring. So as I said, in some cases, there can be 4 years between selection and the auction, signing of the contract, and becoming available to the market. We will not just be sleeping during these 4 years. Elia, as contractual counterparty, will follow up on the progress of the capacities that were contracted to make sure that they actually can become available after these 4 years. So there's some quarterly reports that need to be submitted on the progress of the works. We will also do some intermediate monitoring of the capacity that can be delivered, etc. So that's the pre-delivery monitoring. So that's the stage before the delivery period enters into force. From the moment, and as I said, for some cases, for some contracted counterparties, it's now since November 2025, we are there. They have, of course, the availability obligation. So they need to be available in the Belgian energy system at moments that are relevant for security of supply for Belgium, at scarcity moments. And there's also the payback obligation. That was also quite specific design feature that was opted for in the Belgian CRM. What is this? From the moment that the reference price, that we call it, and then we chose a day-ahead price for that, exceeds a certain level that we consider to be as extraordinarily high prices, at this moment, there is the obligation of the capacity providers to pay back the difference between this reference price, which is at that moment very high, and a predefined strike price. And this is to try to capture windfall profits, to avoid that investors end up with extraordinarily high profits, as we do consider that when you bid in the auction, to compensate for your missing money, you don't cover or you don't account for these extremely high price spikes in your business case. And that's why this so-called payback obligation is the third obligation, which is part of the capacity contract. And as you can see, we got the exemption approval from the European Commission not to have this payback obligation for demand response and for batteries. I mentioned it already several times, but I think it's important to emphasize shortly. So another key stakeholder in this process, in this design, was the European Commission, because paying out capacity remuneration is considered as state aid under the European legislation. So we need to make sure that we respect quite some strict also criteria from the European Commission, and they also need to give their approval to be allowed to run these capacity auctions. Belgium got this approval for the 10 coming years as of the 2021 auction. So voila, this is really the summary in a nutshell, and some of the features mentioned, I will zoom in a bit deeper on the next slides. This is again a summary, but the last 2 points I would like, the last point I still want to emphasize, is also here, sometimes there's quite some confusion. What the CRM does not do, the CRM wants to ensure that there is sufficient capacity available in the Belgian market. We pay capacities to become available in the Belgian market. What the CRM does not do is give dispatch incentives. So capacities are paid in function of the megawatt that they install and that are available, not for the megawatt hours that are dispatched in the Belgian energy system. So this is really crucial. It's also a European requirement. So the CRM does not want to interfere with the energy market as such. It's just a normal merit order that plays a role, but we will monitor based on daily schedules that were submitted, etc., whether the capacities that were contracted under the CRM were actually available at moments that there was scarcity. But the CRM will never give dispatch incentives, except for one exception. If we have doubts for some capacities that they actually can deliver and that they are available, Elia has the right in some cases to ask for an availability test. This will then be announced 1 day ahead, and only in these cases we really ask the contracted capacities to dispatch their capacity to show that they are able to deliver. But this is really an exceptional case, in case we have some doubts whether the capacity is really available or not. So this is really, really important point. I don't know, Nicola, how you want to proceed, that we cover the questions at the end of the session, or I can try, maybe that's the most...
So we can actually start getting a few questions now, Julie, because I see you're somehow middle presentation.
Yeah.
And we already have 2 questions. I would propose just to take it maybe in a concise manner. So the first one is a question by Geert from Vattenfall. So Geert is writing, question that I would like to discuss once the presentation is done. CRM seems to be focused on capacity, but time duration that the capacity can be delivered is also very important from a SOS perspective.
Yes, that's 100% true. There's an upcoming slide on that this aspect, and I see Louis also that you can complement if I don't cover it fully. But this is covered via the derating factor, which is a separate slide coming back on that. So actually, depending on your limitations and the level of contribution that you can deliver for security of supply, you get the rating factor applied on the nominal capacity of your installation. And typically, for example, let's give the CCGT, and then Louis knows the numbers by heart, they get very high derating factors applied because we only have some kind of they can have forced outages, but we know that, let's say, 96% of the time they're available for security of supply. So they're very they get a very favorable derating factor applied. Whereas, for example, if you have a battery, the battery also has to indicate the service level he can give, like the duration. Can he be available 1 hour? Can he be available 4 hours, 3 hours? And depending on the duration of the service he can deliver, the derating factor that we apply is more or less favorable. And then the longer the time you can provide security of supply, obviously, the better the rating factor you get applied. And the rating factor has a direct impact on the number of megawatts that you can bid in the auction, so also on the competitiveness in the CRM. So for me, that's how it's worked, but I don't know, Louis, if you have something to complement on that.
But I think you already answered the main part of the question. I would say that, for example, for the contribution of batteries, that's really a key element that we have in our CRM now, and that's also something that we assess in the Adequacy and Flexibility Study, because indeed for the moment we have, for example, batteries with a 4 hours duration being able to contribute to more or less 50%, meaning that if we have 1 gigawatt of batteries, the real contribution to adequacy is 500 megawatts. But we also see that in the future, this contribution is expected to decrease. And instead of being 50%, it's expected to become 25% in the mid to long term. So that's really a key point. So that really the duration. And that's also something that we try to look at on a missing money point of view, to also reflect in the energy market revenues calculation the fact that the units will also run less in the future because there will be more renewables mainly. And so this should also reflect on the calculation of the missing money. And so we should be able to provide sufficient incentive in the different caps of the demand curve to make sure that even if they have lower running hours, they would still have enough money to be viable.
So I hope the answer by Julie and Louis was detailed enough. So before proceeding with other questions, I will suggest you, Julie, delivering or explain the rest of the content of your presentations, and then we return back to the Q&A.
Yeah, okay. Perfect. Yes, I think the next slide just wants to give a view on where we are after quite some years of running the auctions. So I think the main takeaways is that for the delivery periods 2025, 2026, and then the next one, 26, 27, for which all the auctions have already taken place, we managed to secure sufficient megawatts to ensure security of supply. So their main objective is safeguarded. And also for the other delivery periods at a later stage, we see already here on the graph that thanks to the multi-year contracts, we secured quite important levels of megawatts already. And of course, we still have then the auctions 2 and 1 years in advance to be organized for these delivery periods to finally close the gap for security of supply. In the first auction, we selected 2 new CCGTs that are coming available in the Belgian system. So we indeed managed to attract new generation capacities. but also quite some existing capacity obtained multi-year contracts. And that's a new feature. So at the very start of the CRM, of the Belgian CRM, these multi-year contracts were only available for new capacities, but we got more and more feedback from the market parties that also, in case of existing capacities, you can be subject to very high investment costs to keep your capacity in the system. Also, the regulator listened to this, and we got approval from the European Commission in the end to also grant multi-year contracts to existing capacities. But for them, it's up to 8 years instead of 15 years for new ones. And apart from these CCGTs and existing capacities, the Belgian CRM could also already contract more than 2 gigawatts of nominal then new battery capacities. You can see, to give an idea of the costs, it's a question we also have received quite often, that the cost for the first delivery period is around 180 million euro to pay to all the capacity contracts that have been signed by Elia. So that are for me the main key takeaways here. I think the next table is just to give an idea. We also show it often to market parties to give an idea where you be, around which price levels you need to be competitive, even though that every auction is of course different. As you can also see in the table, it's the high variability in the results, but you see that especially for prices which are subject to the intermediate price cap, so that's existing capacities, they have an intermediate price cap that's applicable to them. You see that the prices are around 20 to 25,000 euro per megawatt. Whereas obviously for new capacities, which are not subject to this IPC, bid prices are higher and are more around these 50,000 euros per megawatt per year. Just to give a flavor of what are the prices on which capacity contracts are cleared in the Belgian mechanism. To answer also the last question here, so Elia indeed publishes all the detailed auction results on their website. I can give the detailed links to Nicola afterwards if you want. So we have the auction results, but also all auction parameters that Louis mentioned, like this payback obligation, the strike price, the rating factors. These are also published on our website. And since the beginning of this month, we also have a daily update on whether or not there is an A&D moment expected the next day or not. So all the information is indeed on our website. I will provide the necessary links afterwards. So these all as very general concepts in the times left, but it's limited, I see, sorry for that. I'll try to zoom in on a bit of the main design concepts, but then the ones that I've not covered yet. So I think here this is mainly covered. So who can participate to the CRM? Basically everyone. It's really an open mechanism, but you do need to respect some kind of requirements. An important one is the minimum capacity, because otherwise it's deemed that if we allow even smaller capacities, it would become impossible to handle from an operational perspective. So we have set the Belgian government has set the level of 1 megawatt after derating as threshold to participate. But we do want also to onboard smaller capacities as much as possible. So there is the possibility to aggregate smaller capacities. So as long as on an aggregated level you reach this threshold of 1 megawatt after derating, you're allowed to participate. So also both TSO, DSO, and even low voltage connected capacities can participate, but it speaks for itself. For example, for low voltage, it's more an aggregated manner through an aggregator that these capacities are expected to participate in order to reach this minimum threshold. And then here you see the emission limit that is applied for the Belgian CRM. So this is 550 grams CO2 per kilowatt hour, or 306 kilogram per kilowatt. So if indeed the running hours are restricted, less efficient technologies can can participate as long as the aggregate emission does not exceed the limit that's stated here. And then I think the last one, it's an important one for some investors to mention, but it also speaks for itself. It's not allowed to combine different forms of subsidies. So if you decide to enter to the CRM, but you were already eligible for example, for green certificates, etc., you need to renounce, you need to sign a renunciation that you agree not to receive the other form of subsidies anymore in order not to have this accumulation of support. So that are really, in a nutshell, the main criteria to be eligible to participate. This is the rating factors. You can have a look. I will send a presentation, but Louis next week will, I think, publish a new calibration report with updated numbers, which are even more interesting than these historical ones. But here you see indeed the big difference between the rating factors for the thermal technologies compared to then the storage or the demand response. This one I also said, but it's an important feature to unlock new capacities. So I added a specific slide on that. So it's possible to have these 15 years contracts if you can demonstrate to CREG that you have a very capital intensive investment to make. And it's quite detailed list of eligible costs available on their website. So it's also CREG, the regulator, who determines which costs are eligible to be covered under multi-year contracts or not. I think this one I also already mainly covered it. This one is a slide I still wanted to cover in a few time left. So I said that we enter now the delivery period. We will start monitoring the service of the contracted capacities. You have, on the one hand, the payback obligation to avoid these windfall profits, as I explained earlier, but you also have this availability obligation. Who will we monitor this? How will we monitor this in practice? Mainly, and that's the main principle, it links to the fact that we don't want to interfere with the energy market itself, that the CRM does not want to give dispatch incentives. So the availability monitoring of the contracted capacities will be done through centrally collected data as far as possible. So meaning the daily schedules that are available. We will check whether the CCGTs had submitted schedules and that they were available in the market or not, independent whether or not they were actually dispatched in the system itself. But if we, all based on this data, have some doubt on whether the capacity is actually able to deliver on the capacity, the megawatts that they promised in their contracts, and if they're not sufficiently visible in this monitoring, then Elia can decide to launch an availability test. So that's a bit like the last resort to make sure that they can actually deliver on what they are paid for. This one is still an important one for this audience, I think. Of course, Elia needs to decide, okay, we say we want to check if you were available at moments that were relevant for security of supply. How will we now define a moment relevant for security of supply? After discussions with market parties, it was decided to take there the day-ahead market price, or the availability monitoring trigger day moments based on day-ahead prices as a benchmark. So every year, before the start of the delivery period, Elia calibrates the so-called AMT moment. It's published on our website. It's now, I think, around 250 euros per megawatt hour. As this price is exceeded, Elia will start monitoring, as we will consider it an AMT moment, and all parties know that were contracted under the CRM know that they need to be available in the system. So you see, it's really the day-ahead price, as you see on the graph on the screen, which is the benchmark to decide whether or not there is scarcity in the system. Once this threshold is exceeded here, there is an AMT moment, and you know that you need to deliver on your contract, so you need to be available. If there was, for example, a maintenance plan at that time, which is always possible, of course, then there's still the option to trade away the obligations on the secondary market. because if you don't do it, and that's in the next slide, voila, there is a penalty mechanism applicable. So if Elia would then measure for a certain AMT moment, they would see that, okay, based on the contract, they were, let's say, contracted for 100 megawatts. We only saw in the scheduler, we only saw in the availability monitoring 80 megawatts. We will apply a penalty so that the contracted capacity will be subject to a penalty for this 20 megawatts missing. Unless you can trade away this 20 megawatts via the secondary market to another party who had excess capacity at that moment. So that's a bit a risk management tool that we had foreseen to allow for investors and for capacity providers to do some risk management to lower the risk, of course, and the cost of the CRM and the bid prices in the auction. And this one, I covered it, it's just a visual representation of the payback obligation. So showing here that once the strike price is exceeded by the reference price, the difference, the excess revenues need to be paid back to avoid windfall profits for the capacity providers. So that's really, in a nutshell, the main principles of the CRM. Happy to answer some questions if people still have time for that. Sorry, Nicola, it was a bit longer than expected.
Usually, can still have a bit of time, some minutes to answer some of the questions you received as your presentation gathered some attention. So we first received a question by Alexander Lamb. So he's asking, if you received a 15-year CRM contract, can you re-enter capacity minus T minus 4 and T minus 1 auctions?
Yes, so how does it work? If you have a 15-year contract, let's say in 2021, your capacity is already contracted, of course, for the upcoming 15 years. But in the next AMF4 auction of 2022, which covers in 2026, you would still be allowed to bid the small remaining part that could be there if, for example, the derating factor changed in the meanwhile and was more favorable for your case. You're still allowed to participate with this margin in the upcoming auctions. But of course, the main chunk of the capacity will already be under CRM contract, given that you have it secured for 15 years. And yeah, you can obviously not earn the double compensation, but the remaining margin that might exist is eligible for participation to the CRM, and that happens in reality.
Thank you, Julie. So while we are happy to take other questions, we just share with you a link where you can provide feedback to our webinar series that would also be appreciated for the future. So if you have any suggestions, please feel free to complete our surveys. It will improve the quality of our services. With this in mind, I also saw a message by Maximilian, who actually is asking a question that I think you partially covered, right? So he was asking whether the CRM data is available somewhere. So in terms of availability of contracted capacity, payback, obligations, strike price, AMT moments. I do not know, Julie, if you would like to add something else to this question.
I see that Louis already shared the exact links actually as an answer in the chat. So the links to the publications are available. So there, the required information should be available. But of course, in case of any questions, feel free to contact Elia. Maybe it's also a good moment to mention that we have a dedicated key account manager who manages the relationship with the market parties, the commercial relationship with the market parties, with separate mailboxes. It's Nicola Kuhlman, if people might know him. But he's our first line of really contact for CRM-related questions. And if it's getting very complex, it's dispatched to the design team or to the calibration team of Louis. But don't hesitate to reach out if you don't find any information that you're looking for.
you, Julie. So we still have a few minutes if anybody would like to ask any questions or also have any comments. I do not see known for the moment being. So if you have also any other questions or comments after our webinar, please do not hesitate to revert back to us, and we are happy to put you in touch with Julie and Luis. So again, I'd like to thank on behalf of ETN, Julie and Luis for your time, participation and presentation, and your commitment. And also I'd like to thank all participants for your attendance at today's meeting. We'll soon share with you the recording and also the documentation that will be made publicly available on our website for the ETN members. So with this, thank you again, and we wish you a good evening ahead.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.